Good morning and welcome to this latest webinar from thebusinessdesk.com in partnership with Freeths. I'm Ben Ormsby and I'm the Yorkshire editor, and over the next 45 minutes we're going to talk all about, well, the role of the regions in the UK economy, particularly as we move forward. So this is supposed to take, let's set a bit of context. This is taking place in the wake of the government's Levelling Up white paper, and we need to know what role the regions are going to play as we move forward. It's the first in a series, so no pressure on Yorkshire and my expert panel here, but we've got to set the bar for our colleagues in the Northwest and in the Midlands following on. But before we get started and I ask them to tell me everything about devolution, transport, talent, sectors, and all the good things that are happening here, as well as the challenges that we may face, just a little bit of housekeeping. If you would like to ask a question at any point, please do so using the button at the bottom of your screen and I will put it to the panel. Anyway, let's get started. So, panelists, thank you for joining me. First question, it's a quick round robin one. Can you introduce yourselves and succinctly tell me what you think the USP for Yorkshire is? And I'm going to go straight to Jennifer first.
Good morning. So I'm Jenny Holmes. I'm an Associate Director in City Economics at Arup, the global design, planning and engineering company. I've worked in Yorkshire for about 6 years. Before that, I had about 15 years working in London, so very aware of the North-South debates and discussions. Worked mainly for local and regional authorities, so including Dan Jarvis in South Yorkshire, but also Ken Livingstone and Boris Johnson in London for a long time as well. So very much part of the public sector discussions about how to narrow the North-South divide and levelling up over the last 20 years. USPs for Yorkshire. Well, where do you start? I think a breadth and depth of economic specialism. So huge amounts of opportunity, huge amounts of growth going on. You know, digital growth, for example, fastest growing sector, fastest growing in the UK. Real strength in health sector. Real strengths in green technologies and environmental stewardship. So loads of breadth and depth, I suppose, of economic opportunity. But I would say the USP is also about some of the intangibles. So things like the diversity of the places. Why do people want to come and live here? Beautiful place to live, the quality of life, and also the pride of place. I think people in a recent sort of survey said they felt Yorkshire before they felt English. So some of the intangibles, as well as some of the kind of real sort of opportunities in the sectors as well.
It's always pains a Lancashire in exile like myself to hear that the Yorkshire talked so beautifully about. Next, moving on to we'll go to you, John.
Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is John Flathers. I'm a partner at Freeths, and we're sponsoring this particular webinar. Freeths, for those of you who don't know, are a national law firm. I'm based in the Leeds office, but I've also got a close connection with Sheffield as well. Our Northern Powerhouse is based in Sheffield, Leeds, Manchester and Liverpool, so we've got offices covering that spectrum. As a firm, we're a commercial law firm, but I'm very proud to say that one of the cases that I really have been interested in that we have dealt with, particularly in the Leeds office, is the sub-postmasters challenge against the government for compensation for the disaster that happened, and you've probably seen there's a public inquiry at the moment. So I'm very proud of that, and that's the sort of work that we do. USPs for Yorkshire. I mean, the first thing I jotted down was I think we've got a great workforce, people who really want to work hard and develop their careers in this region. I've also jotted down that it's a great place to live, the space, the being able to get out and about, and those for me are the two USPs that I immediately came to jot down.
Perfect. Next to you, Charlie.
Thanks very much. I'm Charlie Jeffrey. I'm the Vice Chancellor of the University of York. I've been in that role for 2.5 years or so now, a period quite hugely dominated by COVID. So it's wonderful now, we think, to be properly emerging from that and to think hard about what it is that universities in Yorkshire can do in relation to the economy. And I think that's my USP for Yorkshire. I think the universities, we've got 12 of them in Yorkshire, they're an unsung strength. They're the source through their research of brilliant new ideas which open up economic applications. They're the source of fantastic talent, more of which we need to anchor in the region after our students graduate. And we're also, we have a convening power. We can bring organisations together better than, in some cases, public sector organisations can. And that's putting us in all sorts of brilliant positions to drive the economy. In York and North Yorkshire, there's a fantastic programme around the interface of biotech and net zero, which is at the heart of the Devolution deal proposals. There's a brilliant collaboration of universities around the possibility of siting an experimental fusion energy reactor in Goole. We're working together with all sorts of partners in universities and colleges to think about how we might get the Great British Railways headquarters in York and use that as a catalyst for a future-facing, digitally led rail industry. I think these are USPs, I think, but we've got to surface them. We've got to make sure that more people know about that capability, can interface with it for our general economic benefit.
Perfect. And then lastly to you, James, hoping that not everyone's stealing your thunder.
Well, absolutely. So hi, I'm James Farrer. So I run the York and North Yorkshire Local Enterprise Partnership. I'm also at the heart of the York and North Yorkshire Devolution negotiations, which are just nicely kicking off at the moment. I think if you talk about what the USP for Yorkshire is, I think, as has been articulated, I think pride of place. I think people who are from Yorkshire are incredibly proud and want to stay here. I think people who move to Yorkshire actually want to settle down and stay here. And I think that's at the heart of it. But alongside that, I think we have genuinely world-class capabilities in all four quarters. So whether it's advanced manufacturing in Sheffield, it's the digital sector in West Yorkshire, it's some of the energy and wind power over in the Humber and the bioeconomy in North Yorkshire. So all world-class place, people want to come here, people want to stay, and you've got world-class opportunities wherever you are.
Fantastic. And on that, all that positivity, I've got to take it down to then the nitty-gritty of, we've said it, the last 2 years has been fueled by Brexit. I can now finally say the B word, but I'm not bringing myself to say the P word. Of a post-COVID world, but as we move into this new economy and new world, what do you see those strengths that you've all outlined? The talent, the universities, the green spaces in some capacities of that playing in the new world, and where do you see us? How do you see that driving the economy? Do you want to take that one first, Charlie? Because you alluded to the power of the universities for convening.
Yeah, I think we've got to make sure we get a clearer understanding of how the economy works around established industries and big players, but also the entrepreneurial drive that creates new companies based on new technologies, which can become part of the supply chains of those big players and anchor them here for the foreseeable, but also drive on their own innovation. And we've got fantastic opportunities, as James was saying, around the bioeconomy, which is how we can harness new ways using largely agricultural production to replace our dependence on hydrocarbons, both for fuels, but also for materials, the plastics and all the other things that we currently get from oil. And we have the technology for that. We have larger companies which are beginning to deploy those technologies. And we're nurturing entrepreneurial contributions to test out new ideas, develop them and scale them up. Now that's where I think we've got to really, really focus, getting that innovation chain into the economy so it supports and then anchors the big players, Nestle, Croda, Quorn, Morrison's, Yorkshire Water. They're all companies we're working with. And we can be the thing that really anchors them here and gets them to grow for the future.
That's interesting. And Jenny, you mentioned that it's a plethora of sectors, and I think Charlie alluded to it as well. We're not an area that's got one specialism. We've got pockets of it across the region. How important do you think that is as we move forward in that diversity?
I think that's vital. You need strength in breadth and depth to be resilient. I think the key point which you mentioned earlier was that convening and coordinating. Because of that diversity, it does need that kind of convening power. And the universities, as has been mentioned, is a great kind of convener of some of these sectors and organisations. I think there's some clues in the Levelling Up white paper around mission orientation, because that mission orientation suggests a convening of partners, doesn't it? So how do we set, so we've got our missions in the Levelling Up white paper, how do we then orchestrate that? How do we arrange ourselves to be able to deliver those missions? And I think that's the crucial question. Some of the clues are also in devolution and giving local areas more opportunities to decide how to develop their own strategies. And obviously we've got a Levelling Up strategy that is a national plan. So how again we translate that locally. So I think that the challenge of how to convene and coordinate does seem to be key.
And James, that leads us nicely onto devolution. We know that the regions, one of the interesting things about Yorkshire is its polycentricity. We've already got 2 metro mayors, and we know that you're busy beavering away behind the scenes now, looking on a York and North Yorkshire devolution deal. And we heard last week about, or a couple of weeks ago, about Hull and the Humber looking at a county line sort of devolution deal, slightly different model. How important do you see they're going to be as we move forward to those funding, to get that funding?
I think they're incredibly important. So ultimately, we want business to be investing, and what business wants is confidence. And the thing that you get with a mayor is you get a long-term investment stream and confidence that those investments are going to be made over the longer term. So for the past generations, we've been stuck in 3 and 5 year investment windows from the public sector perspective, and that's really hard for business to engage and have that confidence to make those major investments that we want. Once you get into the mayoral camp, and it was absolutely stark at the Convention of the North last week, in that you either had a mayor or you didn't, and it was kind of two kind of clear divisions. If you get a mayor, you have that long-term confidence. You have a 30-year plan. So actually, from a business perspective, you can have confidence about what's going to happen in any one region, and it kind of enables those investments. So I think having the devolution deal, and I believe you've got to have a mayor. I'm very, very kind of clear about that. I think that puts you in the Premier League. I think it gives you a direct conversation with central government. It gives you a direct influence over national policy on what's going on. But more importantly, it enables you to then work with the private sector to realise those opportunities. And it was quite interesting in if you read the Levelling Up white paper, there's quite a lot about business-led opportunities. They talk about the Humber opportunity Humber that's being developed, and government are really liking, if you like, this. They realise that jobs are created by business. And therefore, you need to get business behind these propositions. And like I say, the one prize that devolution brings, I think, is that long-term investment stream, that long-term confidence, so that you can properly engage these major opportunities that have been articulated this morning and actually deliver them.
And I guess I've got to ask the question then. So you mentioned this. It almost feels there's going to be a 2-tier approach with the mayor and the not so mayor. Do you think that we're going to see those areas that don't opt for a metro mayor missing out?
I think it's going to be harder for them. I'm not saying they're going to miss out. And if we look at Hull and East Yorkshire or the Humber, which is incredibly important. So, I'm York and North Yorkshire, but actually the success of the Humber is massively important to me in what we want to deliver. Obviously, what they've got is the Freeport. So there's slightly different model and different focus over there. And their long-term opportunity is very much going to be driven by the Freeport and what that can bring around the kind of Humber estuary. So it's they still have that kind of focus. However, for other areas, like I say, I think you do need that mayor. I think you need that direct line. You need that long-term investment stream. You need to be able to give that confidence that the investments are going to happen. We're going to improve our connectivity. We're going to improve our transport links. We're going to invest in the skills of the future so that businesses can recruit. And we're hearing lots at the moment about a whole raft of sectors who want to grow but can't get the people that they need. So something has to change. We have to be much better about preparing the people, the workforce, for the skills that are there, and actually to enable business to deliver that growth that we need. So I firmly believe that you really are far better off having a mayor. I think it puts you in the Premier League. I think it gives you that direct route and that confidence to actually genuinely change things. And I think this is the thing about levelling up. What government is trying to do, or what devolution enables, is it enables decisions that are currently made in Whitehall and don't really understand the region to be changed. So we can fundamentally make a shift in how we deliver on some of kind of the key levelling up agendas, whether that's deprivation, whether that's connectivity. It's kind of local understanding of the economy, local understanding of the opportunities, and local decisions around where that money will go and what improvements will be made.
I guess, go, John. Say something quickly. I've heard all this positivity from my fellow panel members, but from me looking at it, we've got to get out of the blocks. We're talking about what can be done and what great opportunities, but at the moment, and I've described it to other people before, we seem still to be in our slumber, and we've got to start to crank up and work out how we're going to get to achieve all these ambitions. We've got all the tools there, but at the moment we need to start putting manifestos together. We need to put together short-term plans from our leaders. We've got great leaders, but we just still seem to be having so much on our plate. We're sorting out the finances through what's happened with COVID. You know, the local authorities trying to get the ordinary general public up and running again. Utility bills starting to go up. All that sort of stuff is distracting us a bit from some of this great opportunity which we've just highlighted. So that's my slight frustration, Ben.
No, and you know, it's important because, you know, it's great as all talking about the strengths, but we know that there are weaknesses and there are areas that we must improve within our region. And, you know, the one that everyone always seems to talk about is always that transport connectivity. And James, it sort of builds on your point, getting people around the region to the jobs, the opportunities. Yorkshire's not a vast place, is it, Jenny, when we look at it in the global context? It's not, you know, it's not miles and miles and miles. The UK is a small country, relatively speaking. So how can we encourage that movement of people, whether it's east to west, north to south, and intercity and intra-region?
Sorry, Jenny. I'm saying, to me, particularly in the north of the patch, digital connectivity is fundamental in all of this. It is just unacceptable that we are where we are with digital connectivity. It's not good enough. And actually, one of the opportunities that's come through the last 2 years of working is much greater flexibility in working practices. Now, you still need to be able to move people and product around from that perspective, but if you can get your digital connectivity right, it gives you a real kind of kickstart on that. And we are just way too slow moving in getting our digital connectivity up to where it needs to be in the 21st century. And I think that's fundamental. And then on the transport, I know there's lots of talk about HS2 and the decision around HS2. I'd much rather have the HS3, the kind of Liverpool to Hull and the high-speed train across the north. I would really champion that. I think that would be an absolute game changer for our region, and I'd really kind of support that. You know, you've got 3 ports at either end. You've got Manchester and Leeds. I mean, that would be just an incredible corridor and an incredible powerhouse for the whole UK economy if you could sort out that east-west connectivity in an effective way.
Can I just jump in on that? Because it's absolutely true. I mean, HS2 is based on the presumption of getting people to London quicker than they can do now. That's probably the last thing we want if we want to think about levelling up. We need to get connectivity much better across the north. Now, it looks like decisions have been made, but HS3 would be a huge game changer. And also the other things, you know, getting a proper road from York to Scarborough, making sure that the smaller towns, which can also be hubs for innovation, because they have specialism, Selby with energy, Moylan with food, Scarborough can become a centre for the marine bioeconomy. That's going to be facilitated if we can get people to move around quicker.
Well, that brings an interesting point, because the last 2 years we've spent more time perhaps in our localities rather than in the big economic centres where the offices and jobs, perhaps our jobs normally take us. Do you think, and John, perhaps to you first, do you see an opportunity for those smaller towns and places to be levelled up because people are going to be working more hybrid moving forward?
I do and I don't. I think that people tend to work quite hard from home. I'm not sure they're always leaving the house to buy their cups of coffee or whatever it might be. Obviously, they're shopping locally, etc. But I do think the future will come back into city centres, Ben. I'm pretty positive that the gradual seep back into city centres will happen. It's already starting to happen. I think peer pressure is going to drive it. I still think physical meetings are important. So I think there will be, undoubtedly there'll be benefits for local communities without a shadow of a doubt from what's happened. But I don't think it's going to be as major as people think it might be. And I do think over the next 6 months, you'll see a shift again. I don't know whether Jenny's got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think it's difficult, isn't it? A lot of this is crystal ball gazing. We don't know the long-term effects. I think there's some evidence that city centres are starting to bounce back, particularly at the weekends. Particularly those places that have already had a strong retail offer, had already perhaps moved into that kind of more experiential visit to the city centre, so that you're doing things as well as buying things. I think there's two separate sort of discussions, sort of two diverging views on the future of towns. One is that perhaps COVID has exacerbated or increased the challenges that some towns are already facing. Perhaps, for example, things like office space is not high quality, it's not focused on health and well-being, for example, and that will make it more challenging for some town centres. And then there's a sort of alternative argument, which there's lots around the 15 or 20-minute neighbourhoods. So Paris has followed the kind of 15-minute neighbourhood model, where there's a real kind of interest in planning in the idea of putting all of your services and all of everything you'd need to access for a good quality of life within that kind of neighbourhood kind of distance. So I think there's different arguments going on, and I think it's likely to be a mix, isn't it? But it's likely to be those places that were facing challenges before, we're probably going to see some of those continue. And it also suggests a role, I think, for places in curation and care, and how do you plan and maintain and rethink high streets, for example? How do we repurpose some of these places so that planning and care and strategy for places becomes even more important?
And obviously one of the threats that we always have when we talk about this growth and the growth of certain key areas of the region is that bits of the region potentially get left behind, and we know there are parts of our region that do have higher levels of deprivation than others. How can we ensure that when we're moving forward with this economic growth and the opportunities that you've all mentioned, that it does deliver for everyone? Does anyone have any thoughts about how we can ensure inclusivity?
You've got to think in the long term for that. You can't just fix that today, and that means you've got to really think from early years up. We're currently, University of York, currently doing a fantastic collaboration with the University of Hull and an access charity called Into University, which is going to set up a community centre in Marfleet and Hull. And that currently is a place where 10% of school kids go to university. The national average is 50%, more or less. And those kids have every innate potential that kids do in other areas, but we're not releasing it. So we have to get in the early years and think about inclusion from that point to enable opportunities to arise, whether or not it's university. But we're not doing that in some places now, and I think we have to focus our efforts really hard on those places.
And a question that sort of ties in slightly to this from the audience of, development has been focused largely, it feels like, in the region on student beds and big sheds in for distribution. But do we think there's enough affordable housing being delivered for the growing graduate population? Because obviously we get graduates coming out of university, but the ideal would be to fix your problem, James. We keep them here. So how can we ensure that we keep hold of those great minds that Charlie's building there?
Yeah, it's a huge problem, and it's the affordable housing problem is only getting worse at the moment, and ironically, it's probably been exacerbated during the last 2 years as people have looked to move out of London and move to the north and the better quality of life that you get in Yorkshire. That's pushing house prices up even more. The problem is government policy keeps slightly moving the deck chairs, but not really changing anything. And I think there's just a fundamental issue with how the housing market is structured and how affordable housing works. And I think there needs to be some real innovation in that field, and there needs to be some kind of freeing up of opportunities to actually allow the private sector to come in and find some new models. Because I think doing it from a public sector led point of view is going to be incredibly difficult. And if you look over the last 20, 30 years, it's simply failed and failed again. And you look at our challenge again in North Yorkshire. We set two ambitions when we did our economic plan as a LEP. One was to double the level of house building. The other was to treble affordable housing. Well, we've doubled the level of housing building. We've achieved that target, but we failed miserably in trying to treble affordable housing. So it is just a huge problem, and I don't think current policy will solve it. I think there needs to be a fundamental change in the mechanism for how it's delivered, and there needs to be a lot more innovation in that space.
John, have you got any thoughts on that, the housing delivery?
I have. I used to be on a board of a social housing operator, and they've always struggled. The government changed from Section 106 arrangements, where developers had to put housing on there, to a contribution, a financial contribution. Of course, the cost of housing now and building things is far in excess. And I think those financial contributions, whilst, dare I say, some of my clients are developers, but probably benefiting developers, has not done any favours at all for the social housing community. And they've also sold off a lot of stock, and people can buy off their stock. And so it has rapidly reduced, and they're trying their very best to do it. But going back to the point, I think government policy has to change on that. And I think Section 106 agreements had a great benefit. And I think there are some real challenges unless the government pump a lot more money into social housing operators so they can build new quality housing.
John, just to come back, I think another issue that you have in this field is that if like the drivers, so local authorities are under incredible pressure to deliver housing numbers in the first instance. And actually developers are very savvy at using that to their benefit to negotiate why there's a viability issue with the key sites so that they reduce the affordable housing from 40 to 30 to 20%, knowing that the local authorities will be shot if they don't hit the housing numbers. You know, again, there has to be a much greater ability for partners to show that backbone and say, like, if it is 40% affordable housing, the thing that should change is not the level of affordable housing, it's the onus has got to be on the land values at the bottom end of the market, so that if you need to pay less for your land in the first instance, and so, you know, less people are making multi-million-pound deals out of the plots of land that they own, that's the thing that has to change, not the affordable housing that is delivered at the other end, which is to the detriment of the future.
And then
being positive there, Ben, that there are some great schemes being built and there's some lovely affordable housing going up, and it just needs a lot more of that to happen. So it's not as if we're not doing the right things. We're doing some great things in social housing, and the operators are really working hard at it. Some have become developers in their own right.
And equally, it isn't a challenge that is unique to Yorkshire. We know it is a wider challenge, but it clearly is one of those ones that we, you know, if we want to keep that talent, we perhaps need to figure out and get it right. Another quick question from the audience, which is, in what areas of Yorkshire economy, the Yorkshire economy, do the panel see potential for increasing exports? You know, where do you see us being able to showcase our global leadership, and whether that's knowledge or physical goods? Do you know, you've talked about the bioscience industry, Charlie. Do you see there's an opportunity for us to start exporting that knowledge?
Oh, absolutely. We're already in a sense exporting it, because we're seeing inward investment coming in to exploit our capabilities into the region. We are, through the cluster of institutions we have, I'd say one of the top 5 regions in the world for thinking about how you can use biotechnology to transform energy, materials, agriculture in the context of net zero. And the lovely thing about it is it connects directly to the energy cluster on the Humber and the chemicals cluster on Teesside. It integrates. You know, if we do that, we'll not just be producing things for export. We'll be bringing in international investment, which is you know, if you want to persuade the Treasury about anything, it's bring in international investment. And I think we're in that area, and others can name different areas. In that area, we are at the cusp of something absolutely brilliant. I know that there is roughly £200 million worth of private sector investment floating around at the moment, ready to be deployed into this area. I think with a signal of commitment from government, and that can come through perhaps the devolution deal process, the benefits that James pointed out of having a mayor to give that long-term perspective. We can nail that, and that would just be the start.
Jenny, you were nodding along with some of those points. You know,
yeah,
what do you see?
Absolutely, health sector. I would say digital sector as well, and obviously digital is now cutting across every sector. So for example, fintech, so financial and professional services, huge number of people in West Yorkshire employed in financial professional services, about 300,000 people in West Yorkshire, which is, when you think there's only there's about 100,000 people employed in financial services in Frankfurt, for example. So you know, it's a leading European city for those activities. So definitely more on tech-driven growth. I think probably advanced manufacturing. We've got a huge manufacturing base still, and we've got all of the assets that will support digital manufacturing and fourth industrial revolution kind of activities in Yorkshire. And I think it's not necessarily about these companies going straight to market themselves. It's about being part of international value chains. So the points earlier about how we can land international investors and make sure that our supply chains are related to those new investments. So I think, again, it's a huge breadth of opportunity for Yorkshire.
And then, it would be remiss not to talk about our neighbours in the north. Yorkshire is only one part of that Northern Powerhouse. So I think there's two aspects to this. I think one is you've talked about the collegiate approach intra-region. So, North Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, South Yorkshire, the Hull and the Humber, all coming together. How important is it that for the region that we don't become isolationist in this view, and that we do look at the things that we can whether learn from Manchester or utilise from Liverpool and outside the region? How important is that going to be? James, you've talked about the importance of HS3 and MPR in a sense. How important do you see that in those learnings?
I think it's absolutely fundamentally important, and Charlie articulated when he was talking about the bioeconomy and Bio Yorkshire, that actually Teesside and is massively important to the delivery of that initiative. We have to be looking at the core capabilities across the north. And that's where you've got to get the connectivity. And the message really is that actually what you've got is an economic powerhouse in the north. And within that north, you have a number of specialism, or we are world class in a number of areas, which actually all join up and interlink. So the north is a huge solution to a lot of problems. We aren't weaker from Manchester being strong. We are stronger from Manchester being strong. We need to absolutely support that. We need Yorkshire, and we need the northwest, and we need the northeast, all to be functioning to the highest level if we want to really drive this forward. So collaboration isn't driven by local authority boundaries or any other kind of geographical boundary. Collaboration is driven by economic opportunity. And the more we can enable that, the better. And a good example is just around, we want more of our businesses to work with our universities because it's so positive. But actually, you want the business to work with the university that is right for them. So if there's businesses in the northwest who are strong in the bioeconomy, they should be working with the University of York. Equally, if we've got businesses in North Yorkshire who want to be working in some of the kind of health tech stuff that's strong in Manchester, that's where we should be making the link. So it's not about geographic borders; it's about economic opportunity, and it's about creating those clusters.
Can I just add on that? I think just before COVID, to be fair, I think we were doing some great things. I know Judith Blake had formed a very strong partnership with the various regional leaders in Manchester and Liverpool, and that was going really well actually. And I also watched Question Time last night, and there was a very clear, dare I say, fondness between Andy Burnham and Tracy Brabin. So these linkages are there. It's just making a lot more of them and working them hard really. And I think there's a start that we can build on.
I think we have to get the balance right between the competition and in a sense, different parts of the north are competing for resources and investment, and collaboration, which can be the thing that actually helps to land the investment in the first place. University of York's part of a grouping called the N8, which is 8 research-intensive universities across the north of England, and we think about programs where we can each add specialism. So that there's one called Net Zero North. We University of York, we contribute to that through the Bio Yorkshire program, that biotech thing. Others are contributing through hydrogen, others through manufacturing of turbines and so on. If you bring that together, you have a big picture which interlocks, which becomes more than the sum of the parts. And you can see that also in parts of the private sector. One of our partners, Ferra, which is a collaboration between DEFRA and private sector interests. They run competitions which are funded by various companies to tackle industry problems. So a problem all of those companies faces, it might be a parasite which limits agricultural production. They bring people together collaboratively to solve it, and then they go off and compete when they've solved it. Now that seems to me to be a brilliant approach that we should be looking at across the north of England.
It's interesting what Charlie said about to mention net zero there, because this is another issue that how does economic growth marry up with the ambition to kind of achieve net zero, and I think that's going to create major opportunities as well, in that all businesses are going to be under increasing pressure to understand their environmental impact, their climate impact, and do something about it and have a plan. And the legislation's coming in for large companies initially, but what starts with the large companies will effectively flow down through the smaller companies. So that is going to create supply chain opportunities, because businesses are going to be looking at how they operate, what is their impact on the climate, how can they reduce it, and actually where we've got the kind of tier one kind of manufacturers in the region, there's going to be real opportunity. We need to take real advantage of that. We see it as a USP for North Yorkshire is that to become England's first climate negative region, because we can really capitalise on our natural assets to create economic opportunity. We're just publishing our plan to kind of consult on how we get there. But I think right across the patch, we need to be understanding net zero isn't a thing for environmentalists to kind of lobby about. Actually, it's an economic opportunity. And there's a real chance right across Yorkshire to get on the front foot. You'll either do it through legislation, or you'll be at the front of the chain, and you'll get the competitive advantage by doing it early. And I think we've got to kind of push and work with our businesses to kind of get at the front of that opportunity as soon as we possibly can.
And another question from the audience, so apologies for taking this on a tangent, but another one we've had is, whose job is it to lead levelling up, or who is actually doing it in a minute? Is it the LEP, James? Is it local authorities, or should it be private sector led and being done by business groups such as Opportunity Humber or the Chambers? Where does that fit, and whose role is it, or is it actually?
Well, I think every group you mentioned there has a really important role in delivering levelling up. I think the challenge is who's coordinating it. So what we mustn't do is say it's the responsibility of the mayor or it's the responsibility of the universities, because if it's not your responsibility, then you switch off for it. Actually, what we need is every place, and it came back, we talked earlier about the towns that might get left behind in all of this. Actually, every town needs a clear plan. And that clear plan needs to be bought into by the public and the private sector, and they need to invest collectively to deliver that. And it'll be the places that don't have a plan that will get left behind. And you look at, looking at a positive example, you look at the town deal and the impact that's had in Scarborough and the ambitious plan that they've seen, and actually how the private sector has got behind that and is now investing money to drive Scarborough forward. So I think it's really dangerous to say it's any one individual's responsibility. What there must be is a plan for the region and a plan for the towns. But it has to be a plan which is jointly owned by the public and the private sector, and it's nobody's getting done to it, because that's when it doesn't work.
I agree with that to an extent, James, but I still feel the local authority leaders, I've always been very admiring of how they work together in certain situations, but there's still the measurement that, you've got to get a big business coming into your particular city or region. Yeah. You're not going to say, well, actually, we've got a big one coming into Leeds, but maybe they can go into Carsford, which will generate employment. That sort of attitude, in my opinion, has got to alter if we're going to get this levelling up thing to work. So I do think there's got to be a lot more collaboration on it. It's all very well producing a local plan for a small town, but unless that town gets the support of the bigger towns, they're not going to achieve that ambition. And that's my observation. But it's how government measures the success of certain local authorities. You've got to get the big business in.
And I guess that brings on to the question of, what threats are there to this potential economic growth that we are going to see? The bounce back, perhaps, as it might be referred to in some ways, but actually it's beyond that. It's not going back, it's going beyond what we had before. What threats are you all perhaps keeping a weather eye on, so to speak? Well,
if I can, so to me, there's kind of two threats looking at it from a York and North Yorkshire. At the moment, we just have huge uncertainty. You've got all these issues around inflation and the cost of production going up. Obviously, on the same hand, that means that the public spend ability is much reduced. So you've got huge pressure on business with increasing costs, but it's very difficult for them to pass their costs on to the public because the public can't afford to do it. So the inflationary pressure at the moment, which is, you can argue whether it's Brexit or it's COVID or what, but it doesn't really matter. The reality is that you've got a real problem there around inflation. You've got a real problem around lack of skilled people. The number of sectors that are saying to us they can't recruit at the moment makes it difficult. And I think the knock-on impact in that is that there is, businesses deferred investment decisions before Brexit because they wanted to wait and see what happened. Brexit happened, and then we've hit COVID for 2 years, and decisions are still getting deferred. So we're not, the real risk is that we kind of plod out of the last kind of 2 or 3 years. And I think John kind of referenced this earlier as opposed to sprinting out of it from that perspective. So I think there's some real economic challenges that we've got to get around. I think at the public sector side of things, the danger is that the levelling up white paper is rhetoric and is not followed up by genuine and serious investment over the longer term. So obviously I'll be able to report back on that when we've negotiated our devolution deal, but hopefully we'll be the sign of things to come. It'll be incredibly ambitious and it'll set us on a good sail for the future.
I'll be holding you to that, James, just so you're aware. I've got it on recording. But okay, now going on to a few more questions. One from Liz, who says that, you know, one of the big things for attracting and retaining talent in the region is the quality of life piece. And actually, a lot of that boils down to the tourism and hospitality industry. She's asked the question of where is the importance of tourism on the levelling up radar and its role in perhaps exporting the region's ambition.
I'm in York. I live in York, which is a tourism city par excellence. I think that York's got a huge opportunity, not simply to trade on the fantastic heritage, the beautiful buildings, and the great pubs and so on, but actually to turn that into an export industry. We've got brilliant capabilities in the city, in the university and in the city, which are thinking about new ways of appreciating heritage, using new technologies like gaming technologies, and new ways of presenting the creative arts. I think that could enhance York as a tourism destination, but it could also be the heartland of an industry which innovates in that area and which York then exports across Yorkshire, across the world. I think we have the capabilities to become a leading worldwide centre in the technological appreciation of heritage. And what a great thing that would be.
You had me as a history graduate. You've got me hooked there, Charlie. I guess one or two that's sort of tied together. So one from Keith that says, what are all your thoughts on the comments made by Lord Moylan regarding Yorkshire being a county of leftist whingers begging for handouts? You can give a quick opinion, but remember, try to be kind. So anyone want to give their opinion?
I think there's a slight element of truth in that. I think we've got to be, instead of moaning, we've got to actually be a bit more constructive and work with government. If Boris has been very clear in that he's pretty dogmatic, and when he makes a decision, he ain't going to budge from it. So we've got to sort of play the patient game and play the persuasive game, and not just turn around and say, well, you never think of us, you're not giving us any money, that's the end of it. So I think there's an element of truth in it, is my view.
Perfect, which ties into the next question, which James, you might be able to answer. Do you think party politics of the serving government will limit the impact of mayors who are perhaps of a different colour?
I think you've got to learn from Manchester. So Manchester have been by far and away the most, done a fantastic job over 30 years. Irrelevant of what political party has been in power, they have worked with that government to the benefit of Manchester. They've been pragmatic and they've done it. They're the template. We shouldn't knock Manchester. We should all aspire to be as good as them. And actually, what you've got to do is get over party politics. Whatever it is that the government policies at the moment, you've got to work with it to the best of your ability and put your front foot forward. And you don't do that by bashing the government. You do that by being constructive with government and going forward with positive opportunities. And that's what we're doing. And I think that's what the whole of the region needs to do.
Perfect. And then we'll go to the final sort of question. What are you most excited about for the region and for the region's economic opportunities as we move forward? Perhaps if we're sat here in 2 years' time, what are you hoping you're seeing as a world? James, I have a feeling you're going to say a devolution deal, but I'll go to you first.
Devolution is a means to an end. Actually, in 2 years' time, what we need an economy which is really bouncing back. We need businesses that are investing and employing people, and we need the universities and our skills delivering the skills that they need. So, we can harp on about devolution, but that's a process that needs to be sorted out. Actually, what we need to do is we need to get behind business. We need business to be invested, and we need to be realising the opportunities. And there are huge opportunities across Yorkshire. Whether it's the bioeconomy, as Charlie referenced, or right across the whole of the patch. There are lots of new things. Hopefully we'll have Great British Rail located in York. We'll have the bioeconomy flying, and we'll be making great steps moving forwards.
For me, Ben, I didn't touch really on the manufacturing side, but I think manufacturing in Yorkshire is incredibly strong. I've personally got some good manufacturing clients, and the firm has as well. And watching those businesses grow and how well they've done during lockdown, has been fantastic. And my excitement is to see businesses like that continue to grow. Yes, they've got a bit of high tech in them as well, but they are genuine manufacturing businesses with great entrepreneurial leaders who have really driven those businesses hard and taken on a lot of young people through the apprentice agenda and made it work. So that's what I'm excited about, that will continue, and we'll see more and more businesses flourishing in this region.
Jenny, over to you.
Similar point, really. I'm interested and excited to see the impact of digitalisation in Yorkshire and how our businesses embrace all of the opportunities that will present.
And Charlie?
As I said at the start, I've been in Yorkshire for 2.5 years. First time in my life living here, and I'm astonished by the capabilities that we have across the public and private sectors, universities, colleges. I think it's an enormously productive platform. I just think we all have to show a collective gumption, self-confidence to really make the best of those brilliant capabilities.
Perfect. So, well, thank you very much to all our panelists. I think it's fairly uniform to say that the opportunities that Yorkshire has as we move forward are there. It seems to be a united view that it's got to be a collegiate approach. We can't do it alone. It can't just be one area doing it all. It must be done together in true partnership. And there will be a write-up of this session available on thebusinessdesk.com, along with the full video for you to watch again if you would like to hear any of the points from any of our speakers. Thank you very much to everyone for joining, and thank you once again to our sponsor, Freeths. And I look forward to seeing you on the next webinar, and have a fantastic day. Thank you very much, everyone.